Do you know where I ended?
Yeah, a couple sentences
Hey, everyone.
back.
Sorry, that's the first time we've had an interruption
In a little while.
in a little while. Not sure why that happened, but I'm just checking my internet speed here. It looks like I'm good to go. Not sure where I left off. You don't know either.
No, because I was getting the message that you were offline, so I kind of.
Well, golly gee. I'm just going to back up a little bit then and point out, by the early 1970s, with the end of Project Blue Book and the shakeup within the UFO field that had gone on, that APRO was very, very well positioned to dominate the UFO field, which I think they did for much of the 1970s. I was just talking about a very interesting encounter that Coral Lorenzen had with Alan Hynek in the early 70s. Hynek started his own UFO organization, Center for UFO Studies, which back at that time seemed like it had a lot of momentum going for it. And he's establishing relationships with MUFON and with the other organizations and so on and so on. So he gets cooperation from Walter Andrus at MUFON, and now he meets with the Lorenzens, where they're living in Tucson, and it's not a success. Lorenzen she wrote about this. She says, Hynek very arrogantly says to her, "Fate has placed me at center stage of the UFO situation."
Oh my.
Yeah, like you don't go into someone's living room and who's been researching this in a serious way longer than you and better than you, and you say that. I mean, there's a certain truth to it. He was the most famous person in ufology by then, but nonetheless, Coral Lorenzen and Jim Lorenzen were proud people. Anyway, the thing that really annoyed her, I think, particularly, was Hynek was angling to get an entire list of all of APRO's field investigators, along with their addresses and phone numbers. So, Hynek did not get the list, absolutely not a chance. So I think that only just raised her suspicions against Hynek ever more. Through the 70s, I would say APRO was well ahead of all of the other UFO organizations in doing active, good, genuine UFO investigation. MUFON was getting started. They were momentum. NICAP was circling the drain by the mid-70s. But APRO was still going really, really well. And they were continually doing like leading edge, at the forefront types of cases. Lots of abduction cases, for example. One relating to an Air Force sergeant named Charles Moody in 1975. And then, of course, most famous of them all, the Travis Walton case, which of all of the APRO files was, I believe, the thickest, largest, biggest file of anything that they had. APRO was very, very engaged in researching this. And as a matter of fact, the Lorenzens were very important in helping Travis Walton get his initial medical examination following the abduction, where they checked his ketone levels and all of these other things, and did some blood work. It was actually very, very important. They were very involved in the famous, I would almost say infamous, case of Myrna Hansen, who was, I still think, an apparent abductee. She was with her son. This is in Southwest. What made it really interesting is her connection with a fellow named Paul Benowitz, who, my God, this is a whole other story. I should do this for an intelligent disclosure, the whole Benowitz affair. But for the moment, I'll just say the APRO was very much at the forefront of all of this. By the late 70s, it was still very obvious that APRO had been infiltrated by intelligence operatives. One of them was their best known researcher at the time, Bill Moore, who wrote the first book on Roswell. And the thing is that Moore told Lorenzens, I got the impression, just from what I've been able to read, he was pretty upfront that he had connections to the world of intelligence. They knew this. They'd known for a long time that their group was being watched. So without getting into specifics with them, Moore apparently told them several times about his connections, and they just said, look, that's fine. Just keep APRO out of it. And so this was the kind of relationship that they had. Um, there were a lot of claims through, in later years that APRO was full of people on the Air Force payroll. One of them came from intelligence operative Richard Doty, who lots of people don't believe anything that Doty says, but I think some of the things Doty said are probably true. And I think this is probably true, that APRO was full of intelligence assets. There are other APRO researchers who probably had arrangements with the Air Force similar to what Moore had. This was what Bill Moore had definitely claimed, that there were at least 2 or 3 others. None of those people have ever come forward, but it's, I would say, very likely that APRO had people who had infiltrated them just basically to send information to the right sources. Keeping in mind, again, all of this is pre-internet. So the question is, if you're an intelligence operation, how do you get up-to-date data on what these UFO groups are doing? Well, you've got to have people. It helps to have someone on the inside getting cases and forwarding them on. Sometimes that's all that they may have done. There are cases as well where, of course, the whole relationship to Benowitz indicates that there was active disinformation happening as well. And I will come back to the Benowitz case in the future. So I'm getting toward the end here, but there's a couple of important things I want to mention. First of all, I was in communication earlier today, email, with a person who was an important illustrator for the APRO Bulletin in their later years. A really, really very interesting person who had a little bit of her inside take on that organization from that time, and mentioned to me that one of her favorite chapters from all of their books was called "Are They Infallible?" And I very quickly found this chapter. Turns out that I marked the heck out of it myself when I read it. And I'm not going to read you this whole chapter here. This is from the 1976 book, Encounters with UFO Occupants. You got to love those 1970s covers, right? But I'm just going to read the first paragraph of this chapter. This is really, really perceptive, interesting stuff here that she writes. She says, one of the most frequently asked and derisive questions from the skeptics is, if they're real machines, why hasn't one of them crashed? And she goes on to point out a number of cases. This is before Roswell was out, before anyone was talking about crash retrievals. And she points out that actually there are lots of cases of UFOs having landed, doing what appear to be repairs, and a couple of minor crashes that they knew about. Not major crash retrievals like Roswell. But I find this question very interesting. Skeptics were asking in the 70s, if UFOs are real, why haven't they crashed? Well, isn't it funny? Because today you hear the same skeptics, or at least their next generation skeptics, saying, if UFOs are so advanced, why do they crash? It's like you can't win. If they're real, why don't they crash? If they're so advanced, why do they crash? Well, I don't know. They appear to have crashed at least on a few occasions. Whether they crash a lot or not is another question. I think even if there's a bunch of crashes, the percentage of actual UFOs that crash is probably very, 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 very low. So the fact that some have come down may not, should not shock us necessarily. Anyway, I just thought that was a very interesting, kind of a funny quote in retrospect. I want to get toward the end here with the Lorenzins and the very tragic story at the end. So as the 1980s come, you can see that there's a decline in the organization, in APRO. Lorenzins are getting old. And they have no real successor being groomed for carrying on this very large organization. Still has lots of members. But you can see the APRO Bulletin starts becoming more sporadic. It's not published with regularity as the 1980s move on. There's still zero cooperation with MUFON or any other organization. And so by the mid-80s, Jim develops cancer, and it starts to really affect his health severely. So by 1985, they announce that they're going to close everything down, and that's really just the end of it. Alan had very advanced cancer and not much longer to live. And he moves to Scottsdale, Arizona, Choate. That's Choate. Not a lot known about this person. From being able to look into, I would take a guess that she does indeed belong to a very prestigious Choate family. It's one of the early families of New England. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to take a guess that that is the case with her for reasons I'll mention in a few minutes. But anyway, so Choate and her partner in crime, Brian Myers, lured Hynek to come to Arizona. They got all these promises of research money, and we're going to put you at the head of this new UFO organization. So they create what seems to me, anyway, a fake UFO research group out of Phoenix. And she gets Hynek to move to Arizona with all these promises. Money never comes. Hynek, very soon, it didn't take him long to realize these two are either scammers or just not reliable. So he very quickly broke off all relations to them in disillusionment. So then he dies in early 1986. Jim Lorenzen dies a few months after that, also in 1986. And Choate and Myers would be back very, very soon because Coral Lorenzen died in 1988. The last couple of years of APRO was essentially nothing happening whatsoever. So when she dies in April of 1988, what remained of the board of APRO, they decide to dissolve the organization. A real tragedy for UFO research, UFO investigation. I think anyone who's looked into this thinks this is too bad. It would have been, there really could, it didn't have to be that way. You know, the Lorenzens could have groomed someone, or even at that time, someone could have stepped up, at least you'd think, and continued on with the organization. But anyway, it did not happen. So what remains, or what happens to the APRO files? The APRO files at the time consisted of, it seems, 18 packed file cabinets, all right, with files, letters, photographs, fragments of objects, all kinds of artifacts that you can think about. It had the famous 1957 Ubatuba UFO piece that was there, a fragment. They had the gloves worn by a Canadian named Stephen McCallick during his encounter in a place called Falcon Lake in 1967, a very famous incident. A massive file on Travis Walton and about 15,000 sighting reports estimated, most of which didn't seem to exist anywhere else. So just you can imagine the value of such a research treasure trove as that. And it was very clear James and Coral Lorenzen wanted their files to remain together. They wanted these files to be freely available to all researchers. But the problem was they didn't leave any instructions in any will that either of them left. And they had, no one in their family had any interest in carrying this on. And so you got these files, they're just sitting there. Now the files could easily have gone to CUFOS. That is the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies. That was in Illinois. Which, okay, they didn't have, Coral Lorenzen didn't have the best relationship with Allen Hynek. But by the late 80s, CUFOS was really being run by Mark Roediger, who I think is a very, honorable person who really had the best intentions for this. And he was in contact with the APRO board at this time. And had a reasonably good relationship with them and offered to purchase the archive. Someone apparently convinced one of the Lorenzen sons that the files should not go to CUFOS. Roediger wrote about this. This is how I know about it. And so that son advised the APRO board, don't go and make a deal with CUFOS. And so they didn't. And so that was it. Roediger actually believed that whoever spoke to the Lorenzen son did so for malicious reasons, but we don't really know. I don't know anything more about that interaction. So now enter two individuals, Tina Choate and Brian Myers. So it's about a year after the Lorenzens die. I believe it's 1989. So again, I think that there's a very wealthy and very well-connected Choate family in Massachusetts. I think that Tina Choate is from that family. I don't know for a fact. I did learn, because I corresponded with attorney Peter Gersten about 10 years ago. Peter Gersten knew the two of them, and he wrote to me. He said, apparently someone has money because neither one is ever employed. That's his words. By the late 1980s, so they've got their fake Arizona-based organization. It's now named the International Center for UFO Research. That's ICUFOR. Choate and Myers approached the APRO board. I don't know how they do this, but they get the people, and most of them in front of them, and they say, look, we are the most logical recipients for those files. And all of the board members knew is that Hynek had worked with the two of them. They did not know that Hynek had quickly gotten very sour on them. Of course, again, no internet, none of the stuff gets out. So they were obviously able to talk a good game. They were willing to take these priceless files off the APRO board's hands. We'll just take them off your hands because you guys don't know what to do with them. We've got an active organization. We'll make them available to everyone. It'll be perfect. We're starting up this wonderful, we got a building. We're going to house them all in. It's going to be perfect. You'll love it. So the board agrees. Just 1 year after Coral Lorenzen's death, they agree, and they give the files to Choate and Myers for free. They don't even take money for it. I talked to Bob Dean about this. Bob Dean, who himself recently passed away a couple of months ago. Bob Dean was an APRO member. He was a board member of the organization, so he was involved in this. And it was really sad talking to Bob about this. He called the two of them a couple of scam artists. That was his word. And he said to me that whole business of how they got the files was one of the darkest points of his life. Those was his exact words to me. So anyway, they get control of the files, immediately prevent anyone else from reviewing them. One person, to my knowledge only, was ever able to see the files, and that was Travis Walton. And actually, Travis wrote about this. This is when his movie Fire in the Sky was in the works, and he wanted to get access to this information. And after enough haranguing and hassling, he was able to get his file. He said, this thin manila envelope with like practically nothing in it. He knew that he had this big fat file. All of that stuff was gone. This very thin, useless stuff with just newspaper clippings, stuff that he already knew, was all that he was able to get. To my knowledge, that's the only instance that anyone was ever able to get access to any of the files that Choate and Myers had. So they at first moved the files to Scottsdale, then I think to Tucson. No one really knows for sure. They apparently are either now in Sedona or they have been in Sedona, Arizona for a long time. So the question is, what were they trying to do? And, it's not really clear. They seem to have been, to the extent that they had any interest in this, they were kind of contactee oriented. They didn't seem to have any real interest in actual UFO research. Were they acting out of greed, just planning to sell the archive for the right price? You'd think that, but they declined all attempts to purchase it, including from CUFOS, which was never able to meet any kind of offer or they were never able to. They never accepted any offer he gave to them, and no one knows. There's always been suspicion that this was an intelligence operation. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible that the two were just very, very disreputable, sleazy scam artists. What you have are you've got these two unknown people sweeping APRO's board off the feet. They get these irreplaceable APRO files for free and permanently close them off to everyone forever. No questions about it. That's it. I'll just mention I did some research on them every now and then because they're an interest of mine. So in 2010, there was a newspaper article about the two of them, about another scam that they pulled. Apparently, massive amount of crystals and fossils worth millions of dollars were swindled by them away from a man named Richard Berger. He was a resident of Seattle. You can Google all of this. And he claimed that they essentially did what sounds like the long con on him since the mid-1990s Brian Myers and Tina Choate of Goldstone Management LLC, this is all on the web, had been stringing him along for years, telling him we can get these things sold for millions of dollars. And it was just a long swindle of this. There was a lawsuit that followed. I don't know how that lawsuit ended. He sued them for damages, and I hope he won a lot of money from them, but I don't know. Now, there's a slight upside to the APRO file story. As far as I know, they are still stored in a garage or a warehouse belonging to Brian Myers or Tina Choate in Sedona. There were rumors, actually, that Myers at one point defaulted on a rental agreement, and the landlord took possession of the archive, and that they ended up either in a dumpster or auctioned off. No one really knows. No one knows. That's the thing. Anyway, a little bit of good news is this. At least some of APRO's records were placed onto microfilm in the 1970s. And I believe one of those reels to date has surfaced and has been scanned. And that is available. And so you can Google APRO microfilm, and you will see there's a very good link above Top Secret. The website has a lot of information about this, and I would encourage those of you who are interested and you want to read some of those files, you can go there. The files that are recovered go up to the year 1956. So most of the APRO file apparently is not available, but at least in theory, it is possible. I'm not aware of anything after 1956 being in existence. But anyway, so they're available. You can read some of them. I would definitely encourage, these APRO bulletins are absolutely priceless, and they're hard to find in terms of the physical copies. I was very fortunate in being able to get a nearly complete number of them, but you can go online. As I said in the first part of this, Open Minds, Alejandro Rojas took the initiative to have these things scanned, and you can read their collection. I don't think theirs is complete either, but it's pretty good, so you can read it. And there may be other digital copies of the APRO bulletin that you can find, and I highly recommend it. I also recommend all of the Lorenzon's books. Again, they were a unusually excellent research pair. And it's a shame that they're gone. It's a shame that their legacy, it could, as great as it was, it really could have been that APRO could have existed to this day. And it's just a matter of, I don't know why it was the case that they didn't cultivate a proper successor to the organization, but sadly, that was the situation. And now we have a situation that I feel is very, very unfortunate and unworthy, where so few people today know just how monumental and how important the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization was, and how Coral and James Lorenzen, what a great service they did to anyone interested in UFO research. And it's interesting, as I was rereading some of the sections of one of their books today, I just realized how incredibly good the accounts that they have in here are. And so I would strongly recommend just hunt them down. I think any of them are worth your while. So that's it. That's the Lorenzons. What do you think about that?
I love that we talked about this.
You want to come up?
I love that people know. I love that I know that this is something very valuable that we're missing.
Come, join.
I'm going to join.
Here we are. So it's a little later that I'm sorry that we had the glitch midway through. I don't know why that happened.
Yeah, I'm sorry also that what you don't know is people were having a lot of buffering that happened after that. And I was actually booted. I don't know how this is possible. You're broadcasting and I was completely booted out of YouTube.
Oh,
so
wow.
I actually couldn't even get into the site. So
Okay.
For some time there.
Such is the wonders of our technology these days. We do our best, and I think most of you seem to be pretty understanding of just how it works.
Yeah, it seemed like it kept going. But
Yeah.
people were having a little bit of a hard time because it was slowing down. But
Too bad that happened.
sorry about that. Not
Any good
sure.
questions or any reactions that you have from all of that?
Well, I'm really glad we told the story. Like I was saying, Richard was explaining some of this to me a while ago, and I didn't really realize, obviously a lot of us are very familiar with MUFON. I was getting more familiar with NICAP.
Mm-hmm.
I was not as familiar with APRO. And, I think Project Blue Book might have inspired this a little bit. We decided to go back and look at the historical accounts surrounding Blue Book.
I think it prompted, it kind of kickstarted a retrospective look.
But I can say for myself, I really appreciate understanding the history of what's happened with these organizations and with the UFO field. I really didn't have a full appreciation for that. And you're a great storyteller. I mean, I'm not just, he is, right? And people have been commenting on that, it's true. So I'm really glad that you're going back and doing this, because I think a lot of us don't have a full appreciation of all of the work and the legwork that has gone in.
It's really
to the foundation of ufology, the field.
It's not ancient history, but it's long ago now that it's becoming forgotten. And these bulletins, they're not on new paper. They're getting older and older and a little more yellow every year. And one of the motivations when I wrote my very first book, UFOs and National Security State, was I was afraid. This is in the 90s when I was delving into there, that we were in danger of losing our history. Mm-hmm. That that generation of UFO researchers, Kehoe and Ruppelt and Hynek and the Lorenzens and the rest, like, they had major contributions. And even when I was, back in the mid 90s, I didn't really have a lot of help from the web in terms of getting information. It wasn't really mature. Mm-hmm. But there was a used book dealer in Rochester who I'll never forget him. And his name is Chris Rossi. He's a book dealer in Rochester. Great guy. He got me like these books. He hunted them down for me. Oh, wow. And it occurred to me that, like, this history is just like, it's disintegrating before our eyes. If we don't do what we can to preserve it, it's just gone. And the next thing you know, a new generation of people come up and they have no knowledge of this. And so I really wanted to, in that very first book that I wrote, I wanted to do at least as adequate a job as I could to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And the Lorenzens were a really big part of that book. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking this will probably inspire people as well. I mean, the Lorenzens sounded amazing. Their passion for this. And I enjoyed learning that they really forged ahead in a different way than the other organizations did, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, NICAP, what you said was more political.
Right.
That was Kehoe's charge. But with them, they were more interested in the scientific evidence of everything, including APRO, contactees, including abductions. They wanted to look at the entire phenomenon.
Yeah, they were not frightened off by these. Like when they first got wind of the Vilas Boas case through their representative in Brazil. That was the 1957 case where there's a farmer in Brazil. I don't know if we've talked about this, but he was brought aboard a craft, and he was brought in front of maybe a human alien hybrid type of a woman, and he's made to have sexual relations with her. He said it wasn't sexy. He said, I felt like when he's like I was being made to breed with her. It wasn't a pleasant experience. Anyway, that account came to the attention of their Brazilian representative, and they wrote up. There was this long write-up of it, and their initial reaction was, "This is some kind of weird sex fantasy."
Right.
But they eventually looked into the case with enough objectivity to decide, no, it doesn't really look like that. And in fact, I think by and large, most people consider that a legit case. So they were open-minded enough and brave enough, like in the context of that culture at that time, to look at some very, very challenging cases.
I also thought it was interesting. I was looking at one of the bulletins earlier, and they just had this really positive attitude where they were saying we can help, and they were encouraging people who lived near Air Force bases to go out and help out and investigate reports, because they knew that people on the bases were assigned to do this, but they knew they had other jobs to do. This wasn't their priority.
Well,
and
they
it was
didn't
really
know if they would have military cooperation, I'm assuming. So they wanted their civilian.
Right, but they didn't really focus on the negative side about it. They just were very positive and let's get out there and do this. We can take this into our own hands. We can do proper investigations. These guys are too busy. We got this, you guys. Let's do it. And just this kind of attitude was really
I agree. They were really trying to recruit and encourage a large number of people, a large organization, and for a long time, they succeeded in doing that.
Wow!
They had they were badass UFO researcher investigators. They truly were, in all the best sense of that. Like they had a good combination of skill sets between the two of them in terms of organization and research and writing.
Right.
And I think for, most of the time, they were really good at inspiring people with them. I think there was the justified paranoia. They were a little bit paranoid about that with cause.
Right.
But I think I don't know if that was what inhibited them from cultivating a successor. I don't know what it was, but they didn't really let go of the reins until it was really too late.
That's too bad.
Yeah. It is.
It's really too bad.
And then the loss of their files.
I know. I hope there's something that can be done about that. I know somebody was saying earlier in the chat that they were trying to track them down in 2005. Bruce Ross Morgan
says, hello. I was contacting people on a message board who claimed to have the APRO evidence files in a storage bin in the Southwest. The trail towards opening those bins. Is there anything else after that? That looks like it.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I had a conversation some years ago with Chris O'Brien, who's a researcher. Lots of folks probably know who Chris is. Lots of work that he did on animal mutilations. He seemed to have a lead on that, but that was a long time ago, and nothing's come out since then. So I don't know if that trail went cold, but I've not heard a thing other than the fact that when the Lorenzens made microfilm of these files, that they did it supposedly in 3 batches. It's like their records of ancient UFO sightings, which they actually collected all of this, like from ancient Rome and from other. Some of that's kind of interesting. Some of it's redundant. We know a lot of it. But anyway, they collected a lot of those early sightings, but also their early correspondence from the early and mid-50s is available. But as far as I know, the microfilm of the later years has not turned up, but it could turn up. I mean, at least in theory, it could turn up. So we would all love to see that. Yeah,
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And all of the new and upcoming researchers, and we get a lot of emails from people, amateur researchers who are just getting into it. These files would be so helpful for people.
There's a lot to go through, and I mean, even the ones that are available, anyone can go through them online, and it will take a lot of persistence and dedication. But yes, absolutely, it's possible. Something here you wanted to read?
Yeah.
If you get your hands on the files, what would you do with the treasure? If I did, I would make a digitization project out of it for sure. Absolutely, 100%.
And make it available.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
You want to digitize them, and you want to create a kind of a repository of it. John Greenwald did something wonderful like that with his site, The Black Vault.
Right.
He gets FOIA files from the government and creates something that's a real a treasure for all of us, actually, what John did. And I think anyone would want to do the same thing, ideally. Unfortunately, those two, Choate and Myers, They just seem like very disreputable people, unfortunately, and they were able to get their hands on the files.
If anyone out there has any information.
Yeah, I don't know. I called her once 10 years ago when I was researching my second volume of National Security State, and I was looking into these, and I hunted down a phone number, made a phone call, got someone who I'm pretty sure was her.
Yeah.
And the answer from her was, well, she's not available right now. I introduced myself. I was very upfront. I said I'd like to talk with her about matters of UFO, and all I got was a polite, okay, and a hang up.
That's too bad.
And that was it. And I mean, I guess I could have just called over and over again and become a real nuisance.
Still have the number?
Oh, no, but I'll hunt it. You can hunt it down. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not encouraging any of that. I don't know. I mean, I don't support harassing people about this, but their names are public domain.
Yeah.
What they did is public domain.
Yeah.
And it's just a bad thing that they did.
Well, it's not really about harassing. It's just wanting the files, just wanting the information. So
absolutely.
Okay, let's just
Anything
go back.
else?
Yeah, let's
I know
just go
it's
back.
getting kind of late.
It is getting a little late.
Anything else here? When looking into the APRO correspondence with El Gostoren, it came up that the Lorenzens did not trust an ICAP or James McDonald. The latter surprised me. Do you have any insights? Well, I talked a little bit about this before, that at least on one occasion, I don't know how many more, but Carl and James Lorenzen did meet with James McDonald in 1966 when McDonald was filled with fire and brimstone and just breaking into the UFO public domain. I do think that McDonald was probably surprised that he did not get a better reception from Coral Lorenzen in particular.
Yeah.
She had a cold eye on all these interlopers. Maybe that's what she thought he was. Maybe she thought, yeah, he's going to be here today, gone tomorrow. McDonald, it would have been a really good thing for her to have worked out a better relationship.
Or maybe she just didn't have respect for anyone who didn't have a holistic approach. Because
it's true. McDonald did not support the whole thing of getting into UFO abductions.
Right. It sounds like at that time, a lot of people didn't. I mean, and you can understand everybody's trying to keep their credibility and those things are subjective, however, I love that she did,
Yeah, I think it was important. Absolutely. Look, I think her attitude was, we're going to go where the information leads us. McDonald, though, he felt that getting into abductions was a disaster. He really felt this way. It was catastrophic. Again, it's easy for people to forget this, but in the mid-60s, like before 1966, UFO abduction was not a phenomenon that anyone was really talking about. The Betty and Barney Hill case was written about and published in 1966. That was the first big boom. Here it is.
Right.
And the following year, the Lorenzens published their notes on the Vilas Boas case from Brazil. And so that really got the ball rolling. And then Ray Fowler, a couple of years after that, got into it. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who I would love to. I don't know how he's doing these days. Started doing a lot of research into this. So it really kickstarted by the late 60s. And McDonald, along with a lot of other people at the time, thought, God, no, like we can't do abductions. This is just the worst. And they're thinking it's all about reputation. It's all about maintaining respectability. I don't think it's easy to look back and see like they didn't appreciate just how important this part of the phenomenon was. But Coral and Jim Lorenzen did.
Always on it. Yeah.
They did. Yeah.
They kind of remind me of someone local that you've always told me about, Bill Sherwood.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I love that man. He's gone. Bill and his wife Rhoda, they're no longer with us. Bill Sherwood was the first person that I got to talk to in the UFO field. He was from Rochester, New York. In the late 90s, I was doing enough research. I thought, I really want to talk to some local people.
Yeah.
So this is 1997. Okay. Go on AOL online because that's really all that there was.
Yeah.
And I typed in to find out if there was anyone local, and I found the Rochester UFO Study Group. I thought, wonderful.
Yeah.
No website, of course, just a phone number and an address. And
Yeah.
I was so shy. I just wrote,
It's hard to
snail
imagine.
mail. And gave my phone number. And Bill Sherwood called me up. He was in his mid-80s at the time.
Yeah.
I was like, my God, this is an old guy. Anyway, I became friends with him. I visited him many, many times. And Bill was, I feel very, very fond of him. He left me his entire library, which was an unbelievable library. But Bill was not only a highly skilled Kodak engineer. Of course, this is Eastman Kodak's hometown, Rochester. He had patents to his name. He was fluent German. He taught himself Portuguese and Japanese in his 70s. All
Amazing.
Right. Knew all the history, all the nightcap stuff, all the APRO stuff, and was also into all the contactee stuff.
This is why I brought it up.
Shocked me. Friends of George Adamski had first edition signed copies of Adamski's books, hosted Adamski at his home where I sat in Rochester. In fact, one of Adamski's last public appearances was in Rochester, New York, not long before he died of cancer in the 60s. And Bill was his host.
Right.
I have a first edition Alan Hynek book. I open the cover and there's a Polaroid of Bill and Hynek together.
Yeah.
Great picture from like the early 70s.
Yeah.
I love the picture. They've got like a book. And it's like a classic pose picture. Hynek's opening a book, he's got his pipe, and they're pointing at something in the book, and Sherwood's looking on. And someone took that picture. Anyway, that was Bill. And so you were going to mention.
Well, yeah, I brought it up because it really reminds me of sort of the spirit of what the Lorenzens were trying to do with APRO. Bill was trying to do it on a local level. You know, people are always asking, you know, what can we do? And, you know, there's meetups. But what was unique about him was that it was a study group. So he has these thorough files, and he investigates.
You're talking about Bill Sherwood.
Bill Sherwood,
right?
Everything from the historical accounts all the way through to channeling. I mean, he was up.
He had it all
in the full gamut, and
it kind of shocked me. Like especially at that time, I thought, "What is this?"
And he takes an academic approach to all of it. So
he was I have to say, a very idealistic man as well. Like he really believed in. The Space Brothers are here. They're going to help us. And he very strongly had that opinion. And it's some opinion that I've still never shared. Okay. But it didn't stop me from just loving that old man.
Wow.
One of the last things that he said to me, actually, not long before he and his wife died, I'll leave out the details, but it was a very, very touching last meeting that we had. And I'll never forget it.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
He's a great guy. Anyway, we were talking about the Lorenzens, and so I don't really know what else we have to say about this.
Well, I think we've gone for a long time here. It's been about an hour and a half, but I just want to say some people were mentioning that there was that Tucker Carlson, I believe, did a piece tonight that we might want to check out. All of us
on UFOs or what?
On UFOs. So,
and why was I not informed of this by Tucker?
I know
he's never had me on.
We should have him on.
Yes.
I don't know if he would say yes, but
I ought to be on his show. I think I would be very helpful for him.
I think he's very fair to.
He did the best
to ufologists
of all of the interviews that were done post ATIP revelation. I would say his interview with David Fravor was the best that was done by anyone.
Yeah, his was really good.
It's quite good.
I'm just trying to find.
So you did something on UFOs? Well, we'll
we'll have to check it out and just mention it here in case people didn't see or you're watching this later.
There you go.
We can all have a little look for that and see what was going on. So, but I think it's time to wrap up.
Indeed.
I mean, there are more questions, but we've been going for an hour and a half.
We laughed, we loved, we cried. It all happened tonight. We had the Lorenzens as our guests.
Yeah.
I really.
It was a good story. Really good story. I'm really glad you told that.
Well, I was glad that. To be able to do it, they deserve more attention.
Yeah.
So and honestly, there was so much more.
I hope we can find the files.
So much time.
That would be really something special.
Yeah, they deserve a good biography. Honestly, now that I think of it.
Wow.
But
or a documentary, something like that.
Something like that.
That would be great. So
okay.
I want to thank you all for being here. Yes.
Do you want to tell people about our newsletter real quick before we go?
Yes. Okay. So we have a newsletter. It's free. We release it every week, usually Sunday night. If you haven't seen it, that's when it comes out late.
This gal does it. She puts it all together. I get
a little help.
Amazing.
We just wanted to, since we're releasing so many things, there's so much free content, and then there's members content, we wanted to keep track of it every week. So if you want to see what's going on, that is the best way to do it. We also put in some links to Project Blue Book, the real story that Richard is telling. History Channel releases a 2-minute clip, and we put that in the newsletter, and we try and keep you on top of whatever's happening. So
Indeed, we do.
I think Pursuing X is giving you a link there. So it's right in the middle of the page. It's gray and orange. So on richarddolanmembers.com. Anything else?
There's always something else, but
we are going to Contact in the Desert. I don't know whether we've announced that yet.
Yes, we are going. It was a little up in the air, but we're going to be there. So if you're out in California in
May
end
31st.
of May, be there.
Yep.
Come and pay us a visit.
And before that, we have the MUFON cruise, which I believe is in March.
You know, I've never done a cruise in my whole life.
I know.
Like, not ever.
I know. I've only done one little tiny one, and my friend that I went with was really sick, so I didn't really see anything.
Look, as long as we don't have a Gilligan's Island or Poseidon Adventure, I'll be cool with it. You know, I don't want to be capsized and have to, cut my way through the hull of the ship.
God,
I just don't want to. I'll do it if I have to, but I don't want to do it.
Oh my God.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, apparently, it's going to be a small group. So if anybody's interested in going, that's word on the street.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So we have a way for people the newsletter.
There's the newsletter.
Learn about it.
Also,
in the
you can go to richarddolanmembers.com. There is an events calendar there where you can check into everything that's up and coming. We are also doing Alien Con when is that? In June.
Yeah, June.
But we have not put that up yet. We're just finalizing the details. So, and I think that's it. If you enjoyed the video and you enjoyed this time that Richard spent with you, please like the video. And an easy way to support him is to subscribe and to be here. We thank you all for our chat. Thank you all for showing up. I know not everyone can watch it when we're live, but we're very grateful for everybody's support.
All right.
Yes,
we got to do this now.
We do. We got to wrap it up.
The time.
Thank you to Pursuing X.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Appreciate your support. Again, Mike Rossi, I saw you there. Thanks very much, sir. And everyone else who supports what I do and what we do. Thanks a lot. It's why we do this. We do this. We're able to do this because of your support. So thanks very much, everyone. Okay.
Have a great night, everybody.
Later.